All right, what's going on, guys? I am Kadarius Washington, and it is Life of a Showgirl. Football Friday. So, y'all already know what that means. It is time for another edition of the CW Six Pack, where each week we take 6 games or more, depending on when the NFL schedules them, and we pick those games against the spread. So, last week, after a disastrous job with picks in week 3, we had a much better week last week. Now, last week we took 8 games because of how the NFL had so many games in the different time slots, and we went 4-4. We went 500. We split our picks. Of course, we won with Philly minus 3.5 against Tampa Bay. We got bailed out with the Bears plus 1.5 against Vegas, and we nailed both of our Monday night picks with Miami minus 2.5 against the Jets and Denver minus 7.5 against Cincinnati. And our losses: Minnesota minus 2.5 against Pittsburgh, the Chargers minus 6.5 against the Giants, the Packers minus 6.5 against the Cowboys. Even though that game ended in a tie for some reason, still the Packers obviously did not cover the 6.5, and that was a game that we could have and probably should have won. And I'll tell you this, we got burned with the Colts plus 3.5 against the Rams. Now that was a game we really should have won. And of course, Adonai Mitchell, the rookie wide receiver for the Colts, virtually cost the team not 1, but 2 touchdowns. Mitchell made a nice play for 75 yards and then fumbled the ball at the 1-yard line. It went out of the back of the end zone for a Rams touchback, and then the game was tied with about 5 and some change left, and right before the 2-minute warning, Jonathan Taylor went on a 53-yard touchdown run that got called back because of a holding penalty by guess who? Adonai Mitchell. And then the Colts punted inside of 2 minutes, and one play later, Matthew Stafford connected to Tutu Atwell for an 88-yard house call, and that was pretty much the game. But hey, when we make picks, sometimes we get bailed out and sometimes we get burned, but it's all for the fun of it. And even though we had a good week last week, still, we're looking for another winning week. It's a new week, time for some new picks, and here we go. So game number 1, the London game. Minnesota, the Vikings playing their second straight game across the pond, are taking on the Cleveland Browns. Both teams coming off of losses last week. Minnesota losing to Pittsburgh and Dublin, and the Browns getting destroyed by the Detroit Lions. Vikings 3.5-point favorites here. And listen, Minnesota has been a black widow for me this season. Every time I've taken a Vikings game, I've lost. But they're going up against a Browns team that's just plain bad, offensively anyway. And they're also making a quarterback change as Dylan Gabriel, their third rounder from this past draft, is making his first NFL start. And it's Cleveland's 41st starting quarterback since the Browns came back into existence in 1999. And no, I'm not exaggerating. Look that up. This Browns pass rush is going up against a Vikings O-line that's pretty banged up, and that could make things very interesting. And eventually, I'm going to learn my lesson with the Vikings, but I don't think it's going to be this week. I'm going to lay the 3.5 here with Minnesota. Now watch me lose that game. All right, early afternoon window. I'm only going to do one game this week in the early afternoon window, and that's going to be the Denver Broncos against the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly, 3.5-point favorites here at home. Both teams coming off of impressive wins. Philly with a good win over Tampa Bay, and the Broncos destroying the Bengals on Monday Night Football. And a really good Broncos defense is going up against a really good Eagles offense. But the Eagles, they just find ways to win games, and they've been arguably the most consistent team in football. And even though I don't think Denver's going to win, I still think they keep this thing close and competitive, especially defensively, but I'm going to lay the 3.5 here with the Eagles. All right, late afternoon window, let's do the Detroit Lions against the Cincinnati Bengals. Detroit 10.5-point favorites here on the road. The Lions, as I mentioned, destroyed the Browns while the Bengals got destroyed by the Broncos on Monday Night Football. And listen, folks, I usually don't take games with double-digit spread, but this one's different. This Bengals team is vulnerable. And by vulnerable, I mean they stink. They got blown out in back-to-back weeks by the Vikings and Broncos. And they have been outscored 76-13 in those two games. How do you take a team that has been outscored 76-13 in a 2-week span? Simple answer, you don't. The Bengals have been an absolute disaster on both sides of the ball since Joe Burrow went down, and the Lions have returned to their dominant winning form and have also scored 30 or more in each of their last 3 games. So even though I don't like picking double-digit spreads, I am smashing the Lions at minus 10.5. All right, let's do the Washington Commanders against the LA Chargers. Chargers, 2.5-point favorites here at home. Both teams coming off of road losses. The Commanders losing to a Falcons team that previously got shut out by a Panthers defense who gave up 42 points to the Patriots last week, but I think we already talked about that earlier this week. And the Chargers coming off a loss to the Giants. And I guess after looking good and winning in the last 3 weeks, I guess they were due for a bad game. But I didn't think it would be against the Giants. But anyway, Washington's passing defense has allowed the 6th most yards in the league this season. And they've also allowed, their 22.8 points per game is right in the middle of the pack. And after limiting the Giants to 6 points in week 1, the Commanders have allowed 27, 24, and 34 points in the last 3 weeks. And Justin Herbert, in the last 2 weeks, has completed less than 60% of his throws with just 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions after a really good start to the season in his first 2 games. But I feel like this is a get-back game for Justin Herbert, given Washington's defensive struggles. Plus, the Chargers have yet to allow more than 21 points in a game this season, so I'm going to lay the 2.5 here with the Chargers. All right, Sunday nighter. We've got the New England Patriots taking on the Buffalo Bills. Bills 7.5-point favorites here at home. Both of these teams coming off of blowout wins. The Buffalo Bills with a blowout win against the Saints, and the Patriots with that blowout win against my absolutely pathetic Carolina Panthers. And one thing that I think has been getting lost in the Patriots sauce is how great of a start Drake May has been off to. May has completed 74% of his throws, averaging 247 passing yards a game with 7 touchdowns and 2 picks. And the Bills, the Bills are a great team, but they're a flawed team. And this Bills defense is still very shaky. And one thing that I've learned about picking these games here, division games are usually very tricky to pick. And prime time, I feel, makes it trickier. I like the Bills to win, but I'm going to take the 7.5 with the Patriots. Plus, I like to pick at least one dog in my 6-pack every week, so there we go. All right, Monday night. We only have one Monday night game this week, thank God. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Nothing says life of a showgirl more than a Chiefs game. Kansas City 3.5-point favorites here on the road. The Chiefs coming off a dominant win against the Ravens, and the Jaguars coming off a win against the 49ers. And listen, folks, the Jacksonville Jaguars have a better record than the Kansas City Chiefs. How the heck do those words even go together? But anyway, the Jaguars have been one of the surprises of the season so far, and their defense has played a major role in that. And the Chiefs look like they finally have their season going. And of course, coming off their biggest offensive explosion in a couple of years against a Ravens defense that has stunk so far this season. But Xavier Worthy has given this offense life, and it looks like the Chiefs are starting to return to their form, which is kind of like I said they would. It's kind of a tricky game to pick, but I'm going to lay the 3.5 here with the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, my picks this week, I'm going with Minnesota minus 3.5, Philly minus 3.5, Detroit minus 10.5, the Chargers minus 2.5, the Patriots plus 7.5, and the Chiefs minus 3.5. Like, comment, subscribe, click that notification bell to be notified of when I post again, and also follow me on Twitter and on Bluesky at CW Talk Sports. That's CWTALKS Sports. Enjoy the football, everyone, and I will see y'all the next time. Peace.